Jim asked me to come here to welcome you, and I do welcome you. I'm delighted to see all of you. I was here briefly yesterday, and I know it's a commitment to get out to travel, to pay the expenses that go with it, and all the things you do. So I do thank you for this, and these are truly the times that try men and women's souls. We have problems that I would have never believed when I was a young man. If somebody had told me 40 or 45 years ago how this country is going to unravel, I would have thought they were loony. But I've lived through it, as have you. But Jim wanted me to talk to you a little bit about Pennsylvania. Probably one of your favorite people, Jim Carville, ran Governor Casey's election campaign back in 1985. And at that time, he described Pennsylvania as Alabama, with Philadelphia at one end and Pittsburgh at the other. And that's probably not too inaccurate. We are a very rural state. And in that area that he's talking about, it's a pretty conservative area. It's a great place, central Pennsylvania, and I'm sorry the weather has been so bad for our visitors, but it's a great place to raise a family. It's a great place to be unless there's 2 feet of snow, and that only happens about once every 2 years out here. So I lived here in the late 70s and left and went back to Philadelphia. And when I had the opportunity to come back in the late 90s, I jumped at it. I could have stayed in Philly or come out here, and I couldn't wait to get back. So I hope you've had a chance to see some of the attractions. I know some of you went to the Capitol already, where our lords and ladies live. And, someday someone will say something to the akin, this once was Rome. There'll be nothing but stone hanging there unless the Lord comes back day after tomorrow. But if you've never been to Gettysburg, it's a great place to go. It's about an hour from here. But if you can't make it to Gettysburg, I would suggest that you go to the Civil War Museum in Harrisburg. It's called the, surprisingly, National Civil War Museum. And it's a great museum. It really is. You can probably spend 3 or 4 hours very easily there. You know, the taxpayers spared no expense to make it nice. And it's really a pretty balanced picture of the Civil War. They don't favor the northern aggressors, which most of these places generally do. So that'll tell you where I'm coming from. But the history of Pennsylvania really parallels the history of the United States, not only with the founding in Philadelphia and the Declaration, the Constitution, and so on, but the Industrial Revolution that really built this country in the late 1800s and through probably the first 30 or 40 years of the 20th century is Pennsylvania. Probably no state could have been more of an example of what Pennsylvania, or what America became, because Pennsylvania became that too. That's, we were the Keystone State. We were an industrial state. We dominated the legislature in Washington. We dominated the Capitol more than any state. We had powerful leaders, and men like Carnegie, Mellon, Frick, Grundy. These people are long dead now, but they are the people who built Pennsylvania and built, for all intents and purposes, a great part of this country. And they were not flawless men, but they were strong, principled men who believed in capitalism, individual effort, minimal government. They should have joined the Constitution Party, I guess. But 1940, Pennsylvania was the second largest state in the country. In 1950, we were the third largest state in the country. And in 2010, we're the sixth largest state in the country. At one time, we had 38 votes in the U.S. House of Representatives. After they do their figuring and jiggling this year, we'll probably have 18 votes in the House of Representatives. We're the third oldest state in the nation. We gave up the number 2 spot to Arizona a couple of years ago. Arizona and Florida are the only states that are ahead of us, and of course they're retirement havens. Pennsylvania is not a retirement haven except for those who can't afford to leave when they get older. And I'm sure we can gain back that number 1 spot if I live long enough. So, but the ingredients that built Pennsylvania, as I was talking about the Industrial Revolution, were sweat and blood, digging coal, melting iron, building railroads, and of course agriculture. It was a hard time, and there were hard men and women who did those things. And I'm doing research on a book I'm writing that kind of parallels this talk, but you can almost cut the last century in half and talk about 1950 as the beginning of the decline of Pennsylvania and of this country. Pennsylvania, the Republican Party, the old Republican Party, the ones that your parents probably belonged to, was at that time really different than the Democrat Party. But in the 1950s, with the beginning of the Eisenhower administration, modernism came in, and the Republicans felt, gee, we have to water down what we stand for if we want to win elections. Of course, it didn't do it much good because the Democrats controlled the House of Representatives from 1954 to 1994 and continued to botch up the works in Washington whenever they're in the majority. And we have enough weak-kneed rhinos, Republicans in name only, sitting down there deluding the people that they are Republicans. And I could go into that for quite a while. But we don't make anything anymore in Pennsylvania. We don't make anything anymore in the United States, generally speaking. All we do now is take in other people's laundry, count their money for them, sell them insurance. The service industry produces no wealth. And if you wonder why this country has no wealth, we don't make anything. Now, I'm, in theory, a free trader. But in practice, I'm a rabid protectionist and a high tariff person. And we have lost our national image, our national integrity. We are in the process of, and have done a good job so far, of gutting the middle class. And even a company like Walmart, which took advantage of what we were doing by offshoring our businesses and cutting our middle class by being Walmart, has lost money for almost 2 years straight now. Now, how long is Walmart going to hang around? I don't know. But there is no wealth produced, and it was the same in Pennsylvania. Our manufacturing jobs have dropped from roughly 1 million in 1960 to somewhere around 200,000 in the state today. And that's all specialty manufacturing, and that's dwindling away to nothing. The number of local, state, and federal employees in Pennsylvania, just in Pennsylvania, the number of local, federal, and state employees surpassed the number of manufacturing employees in this state in 2003. So we have a lot more takers than we have makers. Now, for the brighter side of Pennsylvania, we have a godsend, which is the Marcellus shale deposits underneath the state. Most of you have probably heard of it, and I would guess in generally negative terms. Marcellus shale is a deposit underneath about 3/4 of Pennsylvania. It lapses into parts of eastern Ohio and northern West Virginia, where natural gas can be drilled for and produced. And it's been a booming business here since they discovered it a few years ago. The industry itself pays more than $61 million a year in payroll taxes alone to the state. In New York, where they also have Marcellus, the drilling has been shut down by environmentalists. There's no Marcellus shale drilling in New York now, which is good for the companies in Pennsylvania. We've got a bunch of environmental wackos who have run around and are paralyzing the state. Not that there aren't accidents, as much as there would be with the oil industry in Texas. But they're paralyzing the state. And now they want to put an impact fee on these companies. Well, Marcellus Shale, the shale deposits, are not only in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the largest single one in this region. But they have shale deposits, as I say, in eastern Ohio and in some of the southern states. So it's not critical, and that shale is going to be there forever, that if we punish these companies enough, they can go someplace else. And beneath the Marcellus Shale is oil, which would be even bigger than Marcellus Shale. But I doubt if I'll ever see it in my lifetime. It'll be an act of desperation. And since we don't need natural gas or oil in this country, what's the worry, right? We do have the potential to be the Texas of natural gas. And as I say, the taxes that are paid, if you go along the northern tier of Pennsylvania, there's a lot of Marcellus Shale up there and a lot of digging and drilling going on right now. And they've rejuvenated dying factory towns. I was up in Wellsboro, which is in Tioga County, right near the New York border, visiting some friends a few weeks ago, and they were telling me the hotels, which were falling apart, are filled. The restaurants are filled. New restaurants are going up. They're building new hotels to hold all the workers that are coming in there to work. I mean, it's a godsend for them. They have a short line railroad that in the first year, about 4 years ago, the natural gas drillers used 400 rail cars full of gas on the short line railroad, which increased the revenues for the short line. Last year, they used 2,400 cars, 6 times as much in 4 years. And I've done stories around the state on the shale industry. Not that I carry any brief for them, but the people that I talk to say the companies couldn't be any better in working with local people as far as repairing any damage they do to the land, explaining the leasing processes, holding community meetings. Any complaint that comes about, the industry bends over backwards to take care of it. But there is another side to every coin, and the other side is the environmentalists who are afraid of the pollution of water, of the land around it. But you may have heard of a movie, a documentary, I think it was nominated for an Academy Award, called Gasland, which you'll probably see on television or probably could see if you wanted to watch it. Even in the previous gubernatorial administration here, we had a left-wing cuckoo named John Hanger, who was the director of the Department of Environmental Protection. And even he said that the film is a fraud and distorted the facts. Now, when he said that, I figured, well, it must not be very accurate. But it's still out there, and of course, Jim's friends out in Los Angeles and Hollywood are all raving about it. So when are they going to send us some money, Jim? But we're putting in additional regs and the impact fees and what have you. Now, last year, we elected a Republican governor here. We have a Republican House, which is, I think, about 120 to, that's not right, about 115 to 90, something like that, in favor of the Republicans, and a Senate that is 30 to 20 Republican. Now, you'd think that would be good news at some level, and it's not. We have a $4.5 billion deficit right now that the state admits to. And the guy who ran for governor and got elected, a guy named Tom Corbett, said he would not raise taxes or fees in the state, which after 100 days in office, he has not raised taxes or fees. However, the Senate Republican leadership is getting ready to put an impact fee on the natural gas industry. Now, does the governor sign it or not? If he signs it, it's sort of like, remember old George Bush's read my lips, no new taxes? So I don't know what's going to come out the end of that too, but it shows you how closely the Republican Party works with one another. The Republican leadership in the Senate is contrary to the governor's position. We have a big effort right now to enact a form of school choice in the government schools, which was co-sponsored by a Republican and Democrat senator, both well-intentioned, I believe, but of course they had to put it into the meat grinder. And of course the bill that is kicking around now is school choice for poor kids. And the compromise that is coming out is, well, we'll get to the middle class, i.e. the people who pay the taxes for these horrendous schools, maybe 4 or 5 years down the road. That's not setting well with a lot of conservative groups because they view it quite properly as a welfare program. We started out in the new gubernatorial administration with an effort to sell off the state liquor stores. Pennsylvania's liquor is controlled by the state. It was originally put in at the end of Prohibition to regulate sales so Pennsylvanians didn't get too drunk. Then after a while, when they started adding taxes and fees to it, it became a money generator. So now they're stuck between trying to keep Pennsylvanians fairly sober and raise more money with it. But the effort to sell it off to private industry started out like gangbusters back in January, and it is now running out of gas and kind of limping over to the side of the road because of union opposition and weak-kneed Republicans who dominate the General Assembly. In fact, it's funny, and I don't know how many of you follow Pennsylvania politics at all, but we had a very powerful state senator here whose name was Vince Fumo. And I've known Vince since we were both young men. Well, Vince is currently on a government-paid vacation down at a federal penitentiary in Kentucky. But he was a very, very smart guy, sort of like that Damon Runyon amiable rogue. And I always liked Vince. He never lied to me when I was a reporter. He was always cooperative when I was working in private business. But Vince got sent away. It was a big story here. And Jeff Piccola, who's a Republican senator, and the Republicans had dominated the Senate for the last 6, 8, 10 years in Pennsylvania. And Vince Fumo was a Democrat, a Philadelphia Democrat. And Jeff Piccola, the Republican senator, said, tongue-in-cheek, well, who are the Republicans going to unilaterally surrender to at budget time now? And it's very accurate, and that may happen today, although there's no replacement for Vince, I don't think. But Pennsylvania has mega problems, and again, I look at it as the same way I look at the United States as lagging about 20 years behind Great Britain in most things, labor problems, financial problems, and so on. I look at Pennsylvania as paralleling the decline of the United States, which is a sad, sad thing to see. And I agree with Wes, who said something is going to happen. It's going to reach a boiling point where the con artists in Washington and in various state capitals, the various vested private interests of major corporations are not going to be able to contain it any longer. Reality is going to strike. So. But again, if you want to hide out with us here in central Pennsylvania, you'd be welcome. Again, it's a great place. I hope that you get the opportunity to see a couple of the things that I mentioned. In fact, we have a tremendous Class AA minor league ballpark out on City Island, which is in the middle of the Susquehanna River. It's a farm club for the Washington Senators, or Washington Nationals, I guess they're called now. Problem is, right now it's underwater. But if you're flying out of here, you may look down and see it. Once again, government planning at its best. But the taxpayers will pay for any damages, so that's no problem. But again, I want to encourage you in your efforts. and ask you to stand strong. I really think that this nation, I look at it as the Israel of old that was blessed beyond belief and turned its back on its God. And we all know what he did to them when they turned their back on him. So if we have a few hundred years of slavery coming up, I'm hoping that something good comes out the other end, and it is in his hands. But thank you for your time. I hope I haven't bored you too much.